You're like setting the bar. You're saying, don't, you better be better than those guys.
I'm going to try and stick to the script with that. I've only got one mic, so
fair enough.
I can't hear my follow-ups, unfortunately. It's no shadow here, right? Okay, good. All right, well, why don't you start out, tell us your name and
Sure.
your organization and how long you've been on this beat.
All right, Chuck Todd, NBC News. On this beat, I guess, December of '08. So I can technically say I've covered 2 presidencies.
There you go. All right, and what do you think makes a good White House reporter?
That's an interesting question
because
I think you have to be able to be a quick study. I think you have to be able to be a quick read on things. The ability to know what the 3rd and 4th questions are, to always be thinking about a follow-up and what anticipate the first answer they're going to give you. Because if you're on this beat long enough, almost everybody can give the answer the president would give, Robert Gibbs would give. I think we all can do the first answer. So the question is, how do you anticipate that so that you can get the real news and figure out how to get behind the why? I mean, my obsession on all stories, whether it's about Iran or whether he's endorsing Blanche Lincoln in the Arkansas Senate, is why. When they make a decision, why did they do it? What's the motivation? Sometimes the motivation is politics. Sometimes the motivation is something that happened to the president 10 years ago, and sometimes the motivation is something that happened that day. But either way, continuing to figure out the why.
Do you feel like the job is necessarily to try and throw them off message then?
No, I don't believe that. I think the job, my job is to tell NBC News viewers what the president did today and why. Okay, that's my job. Our job isn't to throw them off. Our job is to figure out their motivation for doing something, figure out what the facts are, to figure out if they're using a correct method to come up with their facts. But I don't think our job is to always figure out how to throw them off. If that was simply our job, we could ask, where's the president's birth certificate, and just to interrupt, that's not our job. I think clearly our job is to make people understand what's going on here. Everybody seems to obsess over, they don't know what's going on in Washington. Washington's broken. I kind of think our job is to figure out, well, it's not our job to tell you whether Washington's broken or not, but at least our job to tell you what's happening here today and why it happened.
Okay. And what do you think the press secretary's job should be, and what do you think it actually is, if there's a difference?
Well, I think, the press secretary's job is to relay the answer question, to, I guess, be a go-between between the president and the press corps. I think on its best days, a press secretary is able to tell you what the president's thinking, what the positions are, what the positions are of the president that day on a specific issue, or what decisions he's made. I think that's ultimately probably why the position was invented, right? Was to disseminate information from the president, because you can't have the president be doing it all the time. What is it now in reality, and what's it been? And Robert's no different than, I would say, any other press secretary we've had. Frankly, going back now probably to Pierre Salinger, which is to push the president's agenda and to try to make it more popular, try to sell it with the American people in some form or another. And in this case, it's through the press corps trying to figure out a better way to sell position X or position Y.
If you could do anything, what one thing would you do to improve the briefing process?
To not have it go in order. I think it should be a little more of a scrum. I think, when I think the press corps is at its most effective, and the White House press corps, I believe this is different. There's plenty of different types of reporting. On other beats, when you're investigative journalism, sometimes you're going to sit in a library for a month trying to dig something up, or you're trying to do FOIA requests. The White House press corps is a little bit different, and sometimes because there is this ridiculous game of evasiveness that happens. In many ways in that briefing room, I believe we're all supposed to be working together. I know we don't, if we're doing it right, we should be listening when they duck a question. If he's ducking somebody's question, if it's ducking your question, Tommy, or Jennifer Levin's question, Chip's question, then, the rest of us shouldn't let him get away with it and follow up and do that. So I think I think more of a scrum mentality would get more inclusive. I know that there's an issue of the print versus and it probably would get more print organizations to get their correspondents back here. I mean, I think what's astounding is how few news organizations have representatives in that briefing room.
Yeah, I'm surprised there's room for me.
Which is great, and I'm glad you're there. That's not the point. The point is, why isn't the Cleveland Plain Dealer there anyway? And this goes to the whole issue of the news business in general and what's going on, and we all know this. But you wonder if there was a little more of a scrum sometimes. Maybe that would help. And look, we shouldn't always be going in order. This isn't a presidential news conference where the wires go first. This is okay, I'm here to take questions. What is it?
Good. Excellent.
See, I knew you'd like that one, but I believe that too. I mean, it's not.
To what degree do you think the opinion media influences questions that are asked in the briefings?
I think the opinion media influences too much. This activist journalism that's taking place on the left and the right creates controversies that don't exist, that aren't part of the everyday, and it clearly shows itself all the time. Sometimes it's a question. I'm not going to single out a story. I don't want to single out. I wouldn't want people singling me out. I wouldn't want to do the same thing. But you know it when you see it, where you see it's an opinion article allegation, not even a factually based story, that suddenly draws a question simply because the Drudge Report linked to it. Which there is nothing worse. There is no worse crime in journalism these days than simply deciding something's a story because Drudge links to it.
Nice.
It's an obsession. It's absolutely an obsession of mine. It's not new to Matt. He has his own subtle ways of pushing back at us sometimes when he knows we've taken a subtle shot at how he goes. Look, he's got a job to do and he does it very well because he wouldn't be so popular. I just don't happen to think that that's the proper way for us to decide what's news. Sure. Yeah.
But I'm sure I got all that.
Mm-hmm.
This is off topic, but off script. I mean,
sure.
But what you're saying there, do you feel like when a question gets asked here, that's off of a Drudge link, do you feel like that helps it to graduate into a real news story? And
it can, but it's sort of like if you're helping give a story legs, you don't know if there's anything based on the story. If you've checked out the story, well, make sure that's one thing. Look, I'm not saying everything he links to is not a story. That's not the point. But there's Drudge-driven journalism, and then there's journalism.
I actually have an example. I'll put the story myself.
You do your own, but
not from you.
Yeah.
You remember that? I remember Major asked about the car dealer, the Dealergate thing, and he said he read about it on a blog, and Gibbs was like, "Oh, we shouldn't read blogs." I think that was a good example.
Yeah.
But maybe I won't.
Be careful. Yeah, was it? No, Major's my. I don't want to single. But you can. Look. The other thing people need to understand sometimes, actually this is a little thing, is that those of us that work for bigger news organizations, sometimes you'll say, why did he ask a question about that, by the way? And this is always something I always want people to know. Because another colleague will be working on a story on that item that has nothing to do with what the news of the day is, but they want a White House reaction. So sometimes that happens, and I think sometimes those of us at the bigger news organizations, some of the questions we ask are not always our question. We're the representative of the news organization there, and they need it asked. Happens with the wires. You can tell sometimes. You watch closely, you can tell when those of us have been asked by a colleague, hey, can you get a White House reaction on camera? Because we have to make a nice little TV package on something. So just thought it'd be worth a little. And that's one to grow on.
Yeah. All right. Let me know, too, if you're running out of time.
Go ahead. No.
This is good stuff.
But not as good as Chip Reed, right?
I don't know.
What was you saying?
I don't know that Matt Drudge stuff is going to be. I bet you we get a Drudge link.
See, I didn't do it for a Drudge link. I hope I don't get a Drudge link. How's that?
Well, you won't get it. I will. And I definitely want it if you're listening. What do you think about the charge of media bias? Do you think there's anything to it, and how do you respond to that?
Well, my response always on media bias is, number one, is I do this. I check my pulse. Okay, I'm a human being. You've heard we're all born with original bias, and this is how I'm biased. I was born in Miami. I grew up in the 70s and 80s in Miami. I'm a child of the Cuban influx. So what does that mean? I have a bias toward the issue of Cuba. I've probably asked more questions about Cuba in that briefing room than any other reporter. So there's an example. Other people will try to say, well, the bias is about a liberal bias or conservative bias. Look, I think the worst bias that does take place is geographical. You know, in that if it happens on the East Coast, it matters more than if it happens in Kansas City. And it happens and so I think it's a lot easier to find geographic bias. I think what's happened is the definition of media has changed. Glenn Beck, a journalist? Is he a member of the media? You know, there's people that are a member of the media, and there's people that are journalists. And now we have activist journalism, where there's clearly, you know, liberal-leaning news organizations now that have started. To me, I'm not referring to them as blogs anymore. They're full-fledged news organizations on the left and full-fledged news organizations on the right. And they've hired their own batch of journalists. And individually, these journalists are very good in many cases. But they clearly have a point of view, maybe in how they do a headline or how they, you know, and you can see other point of view. So that's what's blurring it more than anything. And look, it's not new. The 19th century, it was worse. My favorite thing is, my favorite little historical nugget is the Blair House. Why does it have its name? The Blair House is named for a journalist, the favorite journalist of Andrew Jackson. He insisted that this guy move to Washington, and he bought a house across the street. So we've had media bias and favoritism between politics and journalism since this country began. That doesn't justify it, and I think that the idea that somehow, I think it's a lot. It's hype. There is a whole industry on the left now and on the right of trying to find bias and point it out and say, aha, because so-and-so talked about it today, there it is. Nobody ever looks at a collection of work by a reporter, which when you look at it over time, you realize that 90% of the mainstream media reporters are pretty fair, is probably the better term to use, because you can't be balanced. You can't balance the truth. Fairness is what I think everybody strives for. A good journalist strives for.
That's cool. That kind of leads to my next question. You initially were a Twitter skeptic.
I've done total 180. Absolutely. I fully admit it. Chuck Todd, apologize to the entire Twitterverse. It is the best new tool, coolest tool that I've done, because for one huge reason. I'm obviously a huge political junkie. I've covered campaign politics for 20 years. I get a little frustrated sometimes because I can't write about Arkansas Senate, or I can't get some Arkansas Senate on TV very often. I got first rate. I've certainly got plenty of outlets to do some of these things. Twitter's become a great place to have a ton of campaign type reporting that I can't always get on the air, and so it's fast. It's easier to do than a blog. So my apologies to the entire Twitterverse. Please follow me at Chuck Todd.
Yes, definitely.
Pound FF, please.
Something I've noticed about your Twitter feed is that you know, for a guy who's pretty new to Twitter, and you're becoming one of the most engaging.
Well, that's kind of you to say.
Tweeters. I see you kind of take a lot of crap on Twitter.
Oh, and, that doesn't bother me.
But you're really good about engaging. What do you get out of that?
Well, number one, I think, look, there's no doubt.
And you get good things. I'm not just saying.
No, the credibility issue with the media is something that, look, there's members of our profession have created this credibility problem. My feeling is we're not going to earn our credibility back, but one viewer, one reader, one Twitterer at a time. And so I have found that if you respond and you engage, you're more likely to at least let people in on what we're doing. I mean, we demand transparency on what the government does, and I think people ought to demand transparency in what we do. So you try to be as transparent as you can within reason, just like I think that there are well-meaning members of government that want to do the same thing. And so I guess that's sort of been my motivation about it, is that we have a huge credibility gap. I don't want that.
I got 2 more questions.
Okay.
The first one's kind of hard, so you might want to go back to it. A lot of people need to go back to it.
Okay.
If you could ask one question of any person, living or dead, and they had to tell you the truth, what would it be, and who would you ask?
I hate those questions, and I'm not gonna. I'll say this: I am in the middle of reading William Manchester's Death of a President, and frankly, I've been in the middle of reading this because I read multiple books at a time. So, I would like an hour to interview Lee Harvey Oswald, just because I just want you just feel like there's, we're not getting answers to certain questions on some of that stuff. So on the conspiracy thing, I know the right answer is supposed to be Jesus or George Washington or Abraham Lincoln, but what's the most unanswered questions that we have out there? Is that guy on that front? And I guess I would have wanted to then do a jailhouse interview with Jack Ruby, with lie detector tests, by the way.
You're not the only one. I think one of my earlier interviews said JFK asked him who killed him. So,
well, but JFK doesn't know.
Well, I guess the presumption being that he's up in heaven and now.
Oh, now knows. That's
you would think God would clue him in. That'd be the
that's
person,
That's an interesting. That's an interesting
way
of putting it. Yeah.
All right. Last question. This they make me ask this because
okay.
Site, but what's your favorite guilty pleasure TV show? Do you have one of those things that you're secretly embarrassed that you watch that you're going to totally tell me about now?
Well, I mean, it's not one of I mean, I have to watch The Wizards of Waverly Place every night, and I'm really tired of all the reruns. So Selena Gomez, can you make more? Because my daughter is obsessed with Selena Gomez and Wizards of Waverly Place. I'll say this: here's the thing. It's not that I have found myself following the plot line on any given show. Is that a guilty pleasure? I don't know. I have to be able to talk to my daughter, right?
Well, people with kids all cop out to that kid show.
Yeah,
thing.
Is that what it is? A cop out? All right, that was a cop out. Okay, that's kid show cop out. I'll do the other one, which is
sure, something like that.
No, it's not that. I mean, that my default position on TV pretty much every night is Family Guy. Is that a guilty pleasure though?
What? Yeah, actually, I was just bonding with a guy from Comedy Central last night over our mutual hatred of Family.
Really? I don't know. It's just sort of because it's mindless. I need mindless television. I don't know. What do you want? Lost?
No. Family Guy's fine. That'll
right, because you hate the Family Guy. Really? Why?
It's lazy.
Oh, please.
Like, I want to write a joke, but I don't want to do a setup or a punchline. I just want to, crap out a premise.
Lazy these days is 24. That's lazy.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Lazy. 24 has gotten lazy.
24 is amusingly lazy. I like the way it's sort of like, It
has really become bad acting television.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. It's sad. By the way, I felt old last episode because the girlfriend of Rob Lowe from St. Elmo's Fire was like this.
Mare Winningham.
Yes.
Oh, my.
She was on.
Yeah.
Not looking so.
Same exact.
I had that. In Twitter terms, that was Pound feeling really old.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap up now. Is there anything else you would like to tell Mediaites readers? We have a wide readership across all spectrums.
No.
Fuck off.
No. Everybody hates us right now. It's like it's sort of get a thick skin and get in the game. There's nothing wrong with it. I'll say this: I think the only people laughing harder at sort of media getting beaten up on these days are the politicians, because now they can say, "Yeah, now you know what it's like when everybody's backseat driving you all the time." So, I say we got to figure out how to make all this better. So,
awesome.
All right, that's great stuff.
Let's continue with me. Yeah. I'll put you in a tie with Reed.
Huh?
At least a tie with Reed.
Oh,
good stuff. I really appreciate it.
No, sure.
Do you have a card? I'll shoot you a link when it goes up.
I don't have the card.
Just
Chuck
Twitter you.
Well, but it's the same as Savannah's email thing. If you kept her email, it's Chuck.Todd at NBC UNI. That's our convention.
Some of you guys have UNI, some of you don't.
UNI works for everybody.
Oh, does it? All right, cool. Thanks again.
Stands for universal.
Right.